Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Good Night Story Time with Miss Monica and my friend George. And we're picking up where we left last time. In the middle of our chapter, something had just happened to Bill. Let's find out. Last came a little feeble squeaking voice. That's Bill, thought Alice. Well, I hardly know. No more, thanky. I'm better now, but I'm a deal too flustered to tell you. All I know is something cuzzed up me like a jack-in-the-box, and up I goes like a skyrocket. So you did, old fellow, said the others. We must burn down the house, said the rabbit's voice, and Alice called out as loud as she could, If you do, I'll set Dinah at you. There was silence instantly, and Alice thought to herself, I wonder what they will do next. If they had any sense, they'd take the roof off. After a minute or two, they began moving about again, and Alice heard the rabbit say, A barrowful will do, to begin with. A barrowful of what? Thought Alice. But she had not long to doubt, for the next moment a shower of little pebbles came rattling in at the window, and some of them hit her in the face. I'll put a stop to this, she said to herself, and shouted out, You'd better not do that again, which produced another silence. Alice noticed with some surprise that the pebbles were all turning into little cakes as they lay on the floor, and a bright idea came into her head. If I eat one of these cakes, she thought, it's sure to make some change in my size, and as it can't possibly make me larger, it must make me smaller, I suppose. So she swallowed one of the cakes and was delighted to find that she began shrinking directly. As soon as she was small enough to get through the door, she ran out of the house and found quite a crowd of little animals and birds waiting outside. The poor little lizard Bill was in the middle, being held up by 2 guinea pigs who were giving it something out of a bottle. They all made a rush at Alice the moment she appeared, but she ran off as hard as she could, and she found herself safe in a thick wood. The first thing I've got to do, said Alice to herself as she wandered about in the wood, is to grow to my right size again, and the second thing is to find my way into that lovely garden. I think that will be the best plan. It sounded an excellent plan, no doubt, and very neatly and simply arranged. The only difficulty was that she had not the smallest idea of how to set about it. And while she was peering about anxiously among the trees, a little sharp bark just over her head made her look up in a great hurry. An enormous puppy was looking down at her with large round eyes and feebly stretching out one paw trying to touch her. Poor little thing, said Alice in a coaxing tone, and she tried hard to whistle to it, but she was terribly frightened all the time at the thought that the puppy might be hungry, in which case it would be very likely to eat her up in spite of all her coaxing. Hardly knowing what she did, she picked up a little bit of a stick and held it out to the puppy, whereupon the puppy jumped into the air off its feet at once with a yelp of delight and rushed at the stick and made believe to worry it. Then Alice dodged behind a great thistle to keep herself from being run over. And the moment she appeared on the other side, the puppy made another rush at the stick and tumbled head over heels in its hurry to get hold of it. Then, Alice, thinking it was very likely having a game of play with a cart horse and expecting every moment to be trampled under its feet, ran around the thistle again. Then the puppy began a series of short charges at the stick, running a little way this way and running a little way that way and a long way back and barking hoarsely all the time, till at last it sat down a good way off, panting with its tongue hanging out of its mouth and its great eyes half shut. This seemed to Alice a good opportunity to make her escape, so she set off at once and ran till she was quite tired and out of breath, until the puppy's bark sounded quite faint in the distance. And yet, what a dear little puppy it was, said Alice to herself as she leant against a buttercup to rest herself and fanned herself with one of its leaves. I should have liked to teach it tricks very much, if I'd only been the right size to do it. Oh dear, I'd nearly forgotten that I have to grow up again. Now let me see, how is it to be managed? I suppose I ought to eat or drink something or other, but the great question is what? The great question certainly was what. Alice looked all around her at the flowers and the blades of grass, but she could not see anything that looked like the right thing to eat or drink under any circumstances. There was a large mushroom growing near her, about the same height as herself, and when she looked underneath it and on both sides and behind it, it occurred to her that she might as well look and see what was on top of it. She stretched herself up on her tiptoe and peeked over the edge of the mushroom, and her eyes immediately met one of those of a large blue caterpillar that was sitting on top with its arms folded and taking not the smallest notice of her or anything else. Chapter 5. Advice from a Caterpillar. The caterpillar and Alice looked at each other for some time in silence, and at last the caterpillar addressed her in a languid, sleepy voice. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. This was not an encouraging opening for a conversation. Alice replied rather shyly, I hardly know, sir. Just at present, at least, I know who I was when I woke up this morning, but I think I must have changed 10 times since then." "What do you mean by that?" said the caterpillar. "Explain yourself." "I can't explain myself, I'm afraid, sir," said Alice, "because I'm not myself, you see." "I don't see," said the caterpillar. "I'm afraid I can't put it more clearly," Alice replied very politely, "for I can't understand it myself to begin with, and being so many different sizes in one day is very confusing." "It isn't," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps you haven't found it so yet," said Alice, "but when you have to turn into a chrysalis, and you will someday, you know, and after that into a butterfly, I should think you'll feel a little weird, won't you?" "Not a bit," said the caterpillar. "Well, perhaps your feelings will be different. All I know is it would feel very weird to me." And we will stop there and continue tomorrow night. Good night.